never even mentioned the brain. It was all about strong bones and strong muscles. And so that's what we were taught we were eating for, when in fact, the brain is the most metabolically active organ we have. And the general public doesn't know that nutrition is relevant to the brain.
Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I interview inspiring and influential guests who are making their mark on the world and contributing to the common good. Making your mark, big or small, is creating a legacy, and it's one of the proven ways we can age with energy and joy. Zestful Aging is my legacy. I'm your host, Nicole Christina, psychotherapist and fellow Zestful Ager. Our music is courtesy of Judy Banker. Find out more at judybanker.com. And to find out more about this podcast, my web courses, and other offerings, hop on over to zestfulaging.com. And while you're there, sign up for my email newsletter, The Insider, where you'll get behind-the-scenes looks at my interviews and other fun tidbits. Hi there. Spring has definitely sprung, and I'm seeing little purple crocuses popping up in my neighborhood. And to celebrate the season, I'm taking $20 off of my popular Zestful Aging web course. You will learn the tried and true ways to add zest and vitality to your life, and it comes with a booklet I made just for the course. It's all based on science and my 30 years as a psychotherapist. So hop on over to zestfulaging.com for more information and use the code SPRING2021. You will get $20 off the course, and it is going to be a great way to start the season. Now back to the show. Well, you may hear my Jack Russell Sparky snoring right beside me. So let's begin. I am so excited for our interview today. Our topic is profoundly important for anyone who is interested in addressing their or their loved one's mental health and is wary of the massive power and influence of the pharmaceutical companies. According to the CDC, 1 in 5 Americans suffer from some sort of mental illness, and antidepressants are some of the most prescribed medications today. In fact, you cannot watch TV without seeing ads for psych meds. Today, I have the honor of speaking with research scientists Dr. Bonnie Kaplan and Dr. Julia Ruttledge, authors of the brand new book, The Better Brain. It's the first book to discuss how and why nutrients can be used to treat mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, ADHD, and PTSD. Welcome to the program, Bonnie and Julia.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Nicole.
I'm so excited to speak with you. This combines a lot of issues that I'm passionate about as a psychotherapist and someone who cares about the world's health. But there are a lot of books being published on nutrition and health, and a lot of Facebook posts, I suspect, on these issues, and some even focus on mental health. So I'm wondering what sets your book apart.
Well, I love answering this question, Nicole, so I'm going to jump right in. We happen to think that there are an awful lot of good books out there about nutrition and health, and even some on mental health, but they don't answer what, in my opinion, is a critically important question. And this is a question that our book does address. It's not just how you should eat, but why. And so I hearken back to when I was a child and we were taught to eat properly, and we all know what properly is, basically. Why? They never even mentioned the brain. It was all about strong bones and strong muscles. And so that's what we were taught we were eating for, when in fact, the brain is the most metabolically active organ we have. And the general public doesn't know that nutrition is relevant to the brain. And it's not just the general public. It's physicians constantly have said to me for years, Bonnie, those vitamins and minerals you study, they're not important for the brain, right? Well, they're critically important, but we aren't taught what they do. So I could give you an analogy, but I think maybe I'll leave it there and just say every minute of every day, minerals and vitamins are enabling your brain to produce things like neurotransmitters, enable brain cell communication, etc. And you want to optimize that communication in your brain.
I see. And so can you talk a little bit to the layperson like myself about how does this then impact upon mood stability, let's say, and stress?
Do you want to take this one, Julia? Or
Sure. Oh, sure.
Okay.
No, I can go ahead. And I just wanted to add, actually, can I first add to what Bonnie was saying
Of course.
about what makes this book unique? I think something else that really makes this book unique is that not only do we explain why we need the nutrients that are contained within real whole foods, but we also explain why in some cases that may not be adequate. So some of the book is dedicated towards talking about the research that Bonnie and I have been involved in over the last, for her it's been 2 decades, for me it's been over 1 decade, is looking at the effect of giving people a broad spectrum of vitamins and minerals in a pill form and what effect that has on psychological functioning and psychological health. And in particular, looking at people who are struggling with issues like ADHD or depression, like you're raising, or stress. And so we explain why the additional nutrients may be helpful. And, some of the reasons that we go into are things like some people may need more nutrients than they can get out of their food, possibly because of where they are at in their life, in their life stage. So you raise stress there. So when people are really, really stressed, they may need more nutrients than what they can get out of their food. And the reason for that is that we've evolved to survive when we're faced with a stressor, like if you're in an earthquake or if you're a flood, to make sure that you get to safety. So we really the brain, the body is going to prioritize the fight-flight response, and it prioritizes it over all other functions. And the term we use in the book is called the triage theory, which is that there's a triaging system that's happening where it's the body's going, whoa, the survival function needs to have the nutrients now, which means that other things, other parts of the body, like your ability to regulate your sleep or your concentration or your moods, is then put to the side. So when we give people more nutrients at a time like that, it seems to provide the extra support that the other functions need as well in times of great stress, particularly chronic stress. So I just wanted to say that that's something also that's very unique about this book, is that we go into that detail about the life situations or genetic differences that may mean some people need more nutrients than what they can get out of a really good diet. And we certainly advocate for diet first and food first, but it may be that you need some extras.
And you also talked about the soil depletion being a possible factor.
Exactly.
Yes, I was going to say that's another way in which I know our book is unique, is that we're the first ones to tell the general public about this link to our soil depletion. And, we talk about microbiomes. We have a microbiome in our mouth. We have a microbiome in our gut, which is the one that everyone talks about these days. But there's also a microbiome in our soil, and that's what's being destroyed. And it's having an impact on the nutrient density of the food that we consume. So even if you haven't inherited the need for an unusual amount of minerals and vitamins to make your brain cells communicate well, you might be thinking that you're eating well enough to get sufficient minerals and vitamins, and you aren't. Not because it's not your fault. It's because we are really seeing a decrease in the nutrient density in the crops that were all over the world that we're dependent upon.
And that's a whole other episode, I think, about monoculture and pesticides and that, right?
Herbicides,
That's a whole
Yeah.
other subject. You know, what I think would be so interesting for our audience is if you could talk a little bit about some of the research. I know, Bonnie, you were involved in some of the aftermath of the Christchurch massacre, and Julia,
The other way
That's
around.
actually
other way around. I'm sorry.
She's from Christchurch, yeah.
Other way, and then there was this enormous flood in Canada. So you actually had a living laboratory in which you could test out these nutrients. Can you talk a little bit about how that went?
Sure. I guess I'll start with that one, Bonnie.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
So I was back in 2010, September 2010, I was involved in doing our first, for me, randomized controlled trial looking at the effects of vitamins and minerals in pill form on adults who were struggling with symptoms associated with ADHD, so attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And when during that time we had various different trials going on, and then suddenly we had this earthquake, and it was a 7.1 earthquake, I think it was. It was massive, and it was just outside of the city. It was not. It didn't. No one was killed, and there wasn't a huge amount of damage, surprisingly. But it was an opportunity to test a question, which is, well, what happens when you are taking vitamins and minerals in a level that's greater than you would typically get out of a diet or a typical diet? Do those people recover more quickly from the stress associated with the earthquakes and the ongoing aftershocks compared to people who weren't taking the nutrients? And because we had trials going, it was, as you say, a natural experiment. And our lab became sort of a natural laboratory to test that question. So what we found was that, yes, everyone got stressed. It was very stressful having ongoing earthquakes and aftershocks. But people who were taking the nutrients recovered more quickly compared to those in our studies of people who weren't taking the nutrients. And that was only because of where they were at a trial. Either they'd finished a trial or they hadn't started. So we could ask that question. Then the Christchurch earthquakes of 2011, February 22nd, we had a far more devastating earthquake, and that was in the city. And 185 people died, thousands of people were injured, and our city our central city was destroyed. We're still dealing with that aftermath of rebuilding the city. So at that point, we could ask a different question, which is, if you give people nutrients after a really stressful event, what happens? So we didn't do a placebo control trial. It's not ethical to do it that way, but we were able to use different doses and use a B complex versus a broad spectrum, which is where you have the additional minerals, and also compare to people who we call treatment as usual. They're just a group of people who choose not to be in the study, but we allow us to follow them over time, and they might do nothing. They might seek medications. They might get counseling. So they're just individuals who are experiencing the same events. And what we found was that were absolutely stunning, and that was that the people who were given nutrients, whether it was a B complex or a broad spectrum, showed really substantial and significant improvement in their stress, their anxiety, and their mood relative, and then compared to those who didn't have the nutrients, they pretty much sort of stayed the same. So, and we were monitoring them over a fairly short period of time, 4 to 6 weeks. But even a year later, those who'd been given the nutrients were doing better than those who hadn't received nutrients. So it was a pretty stunning and remarkable finding, and so easy to intervene with nutrients when you are faced with a really challenging, stressful and life-threatening situation. So then I guess over to Bonnie to then talk about the next step in this research.
So if you haven't had enough of earthquakes, I'm going to tell you about a flood and a wildfire. So in 2013 in southern Alberta, we had a really massive, supposedly once in a century kind of flood. And I had never seen anything like it, but I lived on a hill, so I put on my boots and stuff and went out and helped lots of people. And Julia called and said, Bonnie, go tell your mayor.
This is
Go
your
talk to your
chance.
mayor. Go tell him what he should be doing.
Yes.
And of course, I knew she was right, but I also knew I would be ignored. So instead, what we did was another study, Julia and I together. She still had her online data collection system available. And so we went out and recruited people. And as she said, it's just, you cannot use a placebo in a crisis situation like this. And so we had 3 groups. One group got a broad spectrum micronutrient formula. Another got the B complex because there is this international literature showing that B complex in the general population can be very helpful in improving resilience. And we had a comparison group of 1,000 IU's vitamin D. Now, I didn't think we would find anything, Nicole, because there's Julia. She's had 5 months, roughly 8,000 earthquakes and aftershocks in that 5 months in her community. Why would we find anything in a community where we had a single event and all of us who lived on hills went out and helped everybody and the whole city got behind it? It was just an amazing outpouring of support for a single day event. But we found exactly what Julia had found. And that is that both the broad spectrum and the B complex in this general population sample, they weren't clinically diagnosed, they all did better in 4 to 6 weeks, significantly better than the comparison group. Now, the one last thing before we're going to go back to Julia for the final step, but the next summer, we had this massive forest fire in northern Alberta. And so this time I did go to the mayor and I did go to our health services and I did go to lots of people and said, at the very least, give them B complex or just tell them it's cheap, it's easy. Go buy a B complex in the drugstore. We had tens of thousands of people who were displaced. They can't cook. Go buy a B complex, and take one a day every morning. So absolutely no. The psychiatrists blocked me. The dietitians blocked me. We did nothing. And then the next summer after that, our province published the results of mental health. And instead of the curve going down, Nicole, it went up for both mood and anxiety disorders and referrals to psychiatrists.
And that's a great segue because some of this book deals with this dilemma of this robust research showing that people really improve on these nutrients, yet you're faced with suspicion and it's seen as kind of fringy.
Right. Now, Julia, I think, should describe the final step with the mass shootings in Christchurch and what she went through with that. And that is very much relates to what you're saying. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. So in March 15th, 2019, a gunman walked into 2 mosques and shot and killed 51 people and injured another, I think it was 43. People who were praying in these mosques. And it was a horrible event. I mean, for the United States, this is unfortunately not an unusual event, but for New Zealand, incredibly unusual.
Yes.
We've never had anything like that happen to us. So, and it actually led to the change in the gun laws in New Zealand within about a 4-week period. So it was a very substantial event that really had an effect on our community. So at this point, we've got the earthquake studies and the flood study. And if this had been a drug where we showed the dramatic benefit of using these nutrients, it would have been probably received FDA approval and put onto the insurance system or into the public, or be paid for by the public healthcare system in New Zealand. But that's not how it works with something that's not patentable is probably one of the problems, but also it doesn't fit the paradigm of how drugs work. So I'm a white woman I'm not Muslim. I didn't have connections in the Muslim community. I didn't think it was appropriate or necessary to do any more research. It was a time to act and to translate research into practice. So I did what Bonnie did after the flood and after the fire, after the fire in particular. was to contact everyone. And people know me in New Zealand. It's a country of 5 million. And, the mayor knows me in Christchurch, and the local MPs have all met me. And even the Prime Minister, I've met her as well. So I tried to elicit their support to provide the nutrients to the survivors of the mosque shooting. And, I got sent around and around in lots of different circles and wrote lots of different letters and spoke to lots of different people. But the end result was that no one would support it and no one would pay for it. So what we decided to do as a lab was to fundraise and raise the money to give the nutrients away from our lab. And so we did it very much as a grassroots effort. We had members of the Muslim community who were very keen to support this and help distribute it. I wasn't the one giving it to them. I was just the one who was giving it to these people who would then deliver it to people who asked for the help. And there were a lot of cultural issues, like we helped more men than women. Men were not wanting to go and see a psychotherapist, which was what was being offered. They didn't want to access medication, but they were willing to take nutrients because it fit really well with their worldview. So
and it's not stigmatized.
Exactly. Yeah, the nutrients aren't stigmatized. There's nothing on the bottle that says that it's treating mental illness. It's just about good general health. So we had really great success as this sort of almost this underground movement of giving out nutrients within Christchurch, and we monitored them clinically with similar measures that we had used with the flood and with the earthquake, and we saw exactly the same thing, which was the great benefit in the reduction of post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms associated with the shooting. So we really were, it wasn't surprising to us. I'm now trying again because we published those clinical findings, and so I've sent it again to all the people who said no, and I'm giving it another go. I've sent it to the local MPs and saying, please, and the next time this happens, could we be ready to give out the nutrients? Could you accept this now, so that we don't have to go round and round in circles again? So we'll see how that goes. I haven't heard back. They promised they'd get back to me last week. So, but I'm not surprised that they haven't fulfilled that promise. So that
do you have any optimism that the new administration in the U.S. might be more of an ally in terms of mental health issues and looking outside of big pharma?
I'll let Bonnie go for that one.
Yeah, so my roots are in the U.S., as you know, Nicole, and I'm pleased that the new administration is very tuned into science and very tuned into investing in mental health. There have been a few hints about that. But, if they turn to psychiatry to guide them, then we're back to the old thing about psychiatrists are not taught about the things that they need to, they just don't know about nutrients. So they're, you tend to tell people to avoid the things that you don't know about. We psychiatrists in general, this is a big generalization, but integrative psychiatry is beginning to grow. But in general, psychiatrists will tell their patients, don't take minerals and vitamins. They aren't useful for your mental health. And that's, we hope that our book will have it. Yeah, we hope our book will help change that attitude if they read it. If we can get the right people to read it. How do we get to the administration in the U.S. to get some key health related people to read our book? Maybe that's the question for you, Nicole.
Well, I'm not linked up with the Bidens right now, but I have some ideas about who maybe we can talk to, and we can talk about that off mic. Hey, lovely listeners, I have something really special to share with you. I recently interviewed Dr. Elise Bailu, who is the founder of Mindfulness in May. Every May, thousands of people worldwide join the program featuring the world's best experts and build mental resilience through committing to 10 minutes of meditation per day, while also raising funds to address the world's most urgent global issues. Over the last 8 years, Mindful in May has taught over 40,000 people to meditate while raising $800,000 to bring clean, safe drinking water to the developing world. Well, I'm going to give out 5 free registrations for Mindful in May to the listeners of Zestful Aging who write the most descriptive and original 5-star review of Zestful Aging on whatever platform you use to listen. And after you rate the show, please copy and paste your review and send it to me at zestfulaging.com with instructions on how to contact you. The contest ends April 30th. And I'll be joining the program in May, and I can't wait. And please check out mindfulinmay.org. It's really special. Look for Elise Bailou's episode coming soon. Now, back to the show. So this is, I'm very curious, as 2 professional women dedicating most of their professional life careers to this research and seeing this, what would be in any other situation, sort of a miraculous treatment effect. And so you have this, you see the clear benefit, and yet you have to deal with suspicion, hostility, and there's this discounting and almost ridiculing of these findings of what you're doing. And I'm just wondering, as people, how do you negotiate that?
You develop a thick skin.
That's for sure. That's right.
Julia,
taught me that one. That's right.
Why don't you describe what just happened to you on Twitter? Talk about ridiculous, constant hostility.
Oh, that's true. Well, except that's got nothing to do with the pharmaceutical industry. That's got to do with the fact that we talk about, it's just about the suggestions around what you should be eating. And so we get attacked, but from both ends, we get attacked by vegans and by meat eaters that we're advocating for one type of diet versus another, when we're not. We just base it in research, which is that eat real whole foods. That may include some fish, that may include some meat, but certainly it includes a lot of plant food, but not necessarily exclusively. It does. In fact, the research doesn't currently support an exclusively plant-based diet for the benefit of your mental health if you're someone who's struggling. So if you're healthy and you're happy and you have no psychological issues and you're vegan, then that's probably a diet that's working really well for you.
N equals 1.
Yes.
But if you're a vegan and you're struggling with these issues, then it might be a time when you need to revisit this. I appreciate that it's hard. It can be hard to, either because for ethical reasons or for climate change reasons, people may decide they don't want to go there, but they're doing that they're having to compromise potentially their mental health in order to achieve those other goals. Fortunately, in New Zealand, those are less of an issue because of a greater ethical treatment of our animals, as well as having grass-fed animals. And in terms of climate change, the footprint here is just a non-issue relative to the States and the way they raise their animals. So it's a different issue. But that can be a problem. But just going back to sort of your question around how do you manage it, I would say what keeps me going in the times when I kind of go, I'm so fed up. I'm just so tired of the red tape and the hoops and the hostility. I could do something different, is the people who we help. And that's what keeps it going. We don't help everyone. I certainly don't want to give that impression that everybody is cured by micronutrients. There are complicated stories and issues that people present with, and challenges that make it that are for whatever reason, making it more difficult to respond to this intervention, it may not be the right intervention for them, or they may need additional other interventions like psychotherapy, or, they may need a little bit of medications. So it's not going to be it's not the cure all for everyone. It's just that there's lots and lots of people out there who do benefit, and they let us know. I certainly have had thousands of emails over the years, particularly since I did a TEDx talk in 2014, where I've had, over, I think it's at 1.7 million views,
Yes,
which
that's
is
what
a lot.
I saw.
Yeah. So I've had a lot of emails, a lot of contact over the years, and that's kind of what keeps you going, is the people who you've helped rather than the people who are getting in the way.
So I want to add one thing to that, because long before I think I even knew Julia, I had tried studying diet and did study diet for a while in a different context, and stepped away from it. And I remember figuring out that I never wanted to study nutrition again. Of course I did, but anyway, I never wanted to study nutrition again, because everybody thinks they're an expert. Why? Because everybody eats. I wanted to study something where people knew that they had to have real knowledge before they could become a fanatic or whatever, but I was so tired of people being so opinionated. Anyway, but yes, what keeps us going is that we see that it's real. And what motivated us to write the book is that it is just horrible that the public is not being told about this research. And I mean, instead, what they read all the time is, don't take vitamins, they're going to kill you. Well, I mean, we evolved to require vitamins and minerals. So we know that that's nonsense. But that's what they're getting in the media. And we just need to try to wake people up to the fact that there's a whole story out there that they're not hearing about.
And it's, the story is told by, industry that has massive, advertising funds.
Yep.
It is really remarkable to watch television and see these commercials like, oh, your antidepressant isn't cutting it? Why don't you try Abilify? I mean, it's just like, oh, do you have bipolar 1? I mean, as if this is just something that we talk about and we know about. And of course, we're going to run and take the next medication.
And maybe the reason your antidepressant isn't helping you enough is that you're treating a suboptimal level of nutrients for your brain to function with a medication instead of giving your brain the nutrients it needs. As Julia said, that's not the explanation for everyone. There's no magic out there, but we know what we see. And for some people, they simply have a hungry brain.
I see. The other aspect of your work that's very, very different is that you do not receive financial compensation for when you refer people to for nutrition, for supplements. Most people, I think, would assume in the U.S. that you are on the board or that you are getting a cut. You're sort of an affiliate for every single bottle of supplements that are sold.
No, I think I'd like to address this first, Julia, because I helped set the policy on this. I was trained in the 60s and 70s and early 80s with my, and all my degrees are from the States. And at that time, I watched what was happening. I saw this revolution happening. Where we went from no legitimate scientist would ever accept money from a company to, the only pharmaceutical research that's getting done is by people who are funded by pharmaceutical companies. And pretty soon it was, the pharmaceutical companies are actually running the clinical trials and they're paying doctors to put their names on the articles. And I know that because as a professor in a faculty of medicine, I would occasionally get a letter inviting me to put my name on some study that I hadn't been a part of. So, I mean, this transformation was really appalling to me. And so when I started studying the broad spectrum micronutrient approach, there was no company, But eventually the two gentlemen in southern Alberta who had this breakthrough idea of using a broad spectrum of nutrients at once, Tony Stephan and David Hardy, eventually they did form a company. And I just thought we had better stay arm's length away. And so with their assistance, we drafted a policy, and it hasn't changed. And this has been 25 years now, or close to 25. And what we said was they would never, ever fund studies. They would always be willing to provide free formula and placebo for any ethics approved, especially academic study, because that's where you can get the proper support to do a decent study like what Julia's doing. And, we academics wouldn't have any way of buying the product. So they would provide the product at no cost. And even if they didn't like the results of the study, they would have no say in it. So they would stay hands off. And we have been very clear about that all along. And in fact, as I always say, I won't even let these people buy me a cup of tea. I don't. I just
don't want ties. You don't want obligations. I think that, I read that in your book, and I thought, I understand it. I appreciate it. But as somebody who's, born in the U.S. and so used to this, and a mental health professional, it really took me a minute to wrap my mind around that.
Well, if you were born as I was in the 1940s, you would see what a difference it is. You're obviously a lot younger than I am, Nicole.
Yeah, no, but it's been a very, very important way of develop. I mean, that was an incredibly important document or agreement that Bonnie developed with the Tony and David. So I followed suit, but it doesn't mean that people don't think that you have ties. And so I've been accused of it. Bonnie's been accused of it.
Geez.
And so, I've had all of my finances been forced to be investigated, because when you work for a university, everything is open to the public. They can use the Official Information Act and request all information on your funds. So I've always been exonerated by the university and shown that I have no affiliation. But it's very stressful when that happens, that you've been asked to provide all of the detail of your funds. A lot of our funding is philanthropic, so we've had people who donate money to our research. In fact, that's what got me going in the first instance, and is what allowed me to do that research after the earthquakes, was that I had recently received a philanthropic donation to get this study on ADHD going. But at the same time, it meant that when that earthquake happened, I had the funds to be able to pay research assistants and to, just the costs associated with running that study. I could just get on with it and not have to apply for a grant, which would have delayed it by months and months, and would have meant that you would never have been able to do the study that you want to do. So it's been really wonderful to have that level of philanthropic support.
I would think so. So I wonder what we can say to our audience who are listening and saying, this sounds very interesting. I want to look into it more. Besides buying your book, The Better Brain, what's the next step for them?
I think that would be the messages that are in the Better Brain, which is to focus on food first. And that is to really reflect on the foods that you're eating, which is, if you're eating a diet, which most, half of Americans get 50% of the caloric intake of Americans comes from ultra processed food. Is that the right? Am I think?
That's what I would.
Yes. So
that means I was thinking, raising. Yeah.
So many Americans are getting their calories from ultra processed food, and that's your foods that are typically in your supermarkets or in your gas stations or in those 7-Elevens. Those foods where they're packaged, they're highly processed, and they provide you with very few, if not none, no nutrients that are required for the brain to function, like to make the neurotransmitters or to ensure that your body gets good energy or to help repair DNA, etc. So that's the first step, would be to really reflect on the foods that you're eating and start slowly shifting towards more real foods, whole foods, foods that you cook, foods that your grandmother would recognize, those types of foods. I would say that's the first step. That's something that all of us can do. All of us can start that change. And it doesn't have to be expensive. We give lots of tips in the book about how to do that cheaply, and it's a myth that it has to be expensive. And I push back now when people say, oh, it's too expensive to eat well. And I'm like, well, and that's often a reason why people don't even bother to try, is they just think it's going to be impossible. So I think we really need to push back that we can eat well on a budget.
It sounds like, maybe the first thing that folks need to really understand is the brain is pretty greedy, right? And it needs a lot of nutrients, even though it's a small portion of our body weight, and that we need to be very mindful and intentional about feeding it properly so it can do what it needs to do.
Absolutely. If that's why this is kind of where we started out, Nicole. That's why I think it's so important that people know why they have to eat nutritiously. I mean, it is estimated that less than 15% of Americans, or really any Western country, less than 15% of the people are getting the minimum number of fruits and vegetables per day. That means 85%, and that's probably conservative, are simply not even trying very hard to consume good, healthy food. And so what does that mean? Well, they're turning to ultra-processed food, and they don't know that every bite that they eat is feeding or not feeding their brain. So that's absolutely the first thing, is to teach them why we have to pay attention to this topic.
And I think that that's something that we need to hear again and again. I was in the grocery store, and sometimes I look at particularly heinous examples of processed food, and I'm sure you might do this too. But I saw, because it's Easter coming up, and I saw that they had Yellow Peeps breakfast cereal.
Oh,
and I thought, there's nowhere to go from there.
Yeah.
You've really hit the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go
ahead, Jill.
Okay, sure. Just on that note, I've been running a free online course on edX platform. It's called Mental Health and Nutrition, and one of the discussion tasks of people who are taking the course is to go into your cupboard and reflect on, talk about what's on the labels of packages. And what has been really an eye-opener for me, I suppose not surprising, but still an eye-opener to see that this is relevant across the whole world, because there are people from all over the world who are taking this course, is that the focus of the label is on your fats, your carbohydrates, and your proteins. So if you read the nutritional information, most of the information is about that. You might get some information about one or two of those micronutrients. Maybe they might say a little bit about vitamin C, or how much vitamin D might be in that product. But they'll at most list maybe two or three. They won't list the full, we say about 30, so 15 minerals and 15 vitamins. We talk about that in the book, of minerals and vitamins that you need, and they're just not listed. So the packages aren't directing the public to think about it. So we really do have a lot of work to do with the food industry to change the messages that they have on their packages. I joke in the online course about how there's these star ratings, or there's traffic light systems. It doesn't exist in the States, but they are available. They're on packages in New Zealand and Australia and in the UK, about what's essentially the more stars is about what's not in your product. So, if it doesn't have sodium, low in sugar, low in calories, low in saturated fats. So that's pretty much makes up their star rating. And then 1-star rating for possessing only one nutrient like iron. So I say essentially a cardboard box would would almost hit a 5-star rating, but that doesn't mean you should eat it. So it's just a terrible rating system. So the messages are not focused on thinking about what you should be eating rather than what you shouldn't be eating. So, but I know, Bonnie, you had more to say.
Well, I'll just add to what Julia just said. Is, you know, if those ultra-processed, quote, foods, unquotes, which are really just chemical soups, if they had a lot of vitamin C in there, then they would be required to list it. There are levels at which, you know, when there is enough of certain things, you've got to put it down. But there isn't enough of all those 30 micronutrients to bother, and that's why the labels are, I mean, what they are. So it's the public we need to really educate.
Have either of you had a chance to look at Mark Bittman's new book, Animal Vegetable Junk?
No.
Oh, wow.
I've heard it recommended. Yeah.
It's excellent. And I think you would love it. It just came out. And I am in his email inbox saying, I would so love to talk to you about this. I think you'd find it fascinating. It's the culture of food and a lot of what you're talking about and who gets to decide what people are eating. So I'm going to wrap it up here because I know that both of you are busy. We're dealing with 3 different time zones. But I just wanted to say that it has been such an honor for me to speak with you today, Bonnie and Julia. Your work is so important, and I just want to thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
You're very welcome. So we've talked a lot about the importance of educating our physicians, educating the general public. We also have to educate our funding bodies because it has been almost impossible for the people wanting to do. There's so many studies that need to be done. You might think that this is wrapped up. It is not. There are so many questions we have that need to be addressed, but it's very hard to get funding for any study, especially in the U.S., any study that doesn't study just a single micronutrient at a time. So you can get a grant to study even obviously vitamin D, obviously omega-3s, whatever, but to study a broad spectrum, it's sent back. They don't want to look at it. And so I'm retired. One of my retirement activities has been I set up philanthropic charitable funds, one in the U.S. and one in Canada. And we've raised almost $900,000 already, and all of it is distributed. And it has been funding research in Canada, the U.S., and New Zealand, including a bit of Julia's work. She's had many other philanthropic donations also. But the point is that I don't want to keep doing that, okay? We need more scientists and we need a louder voice at places like NIH saying, why isn't there funding available to study this?
I think that's an excellent point. And this idea that you keep running into roadblocks when the research has been so clear. And, you know, it must be incredibly frustrating. And I give you credit for persevering. So let me just end by asking you, where can our audience find you and find out more about your work and your research?
Our website is thebetterbrainbook.com.
Aha. Okay. Thebetterbrainbook.com. And I will put that in the show notes. It's coming out at the end of April. And you talk all about how people can obtain some of these nutritional supplements. You obviously look at the research, some of the obstacles. It's an excellent book, highly recommended. And again, I so appreciate your work and your persistence in this. And it's been a real pleasure for me to speak with both of you today.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure. Thanks, Nicole.
Hey everyone, I wanted to tell you about a powerful new tool that supports your mental and emotional health in what are extremely trying times. And you may remember that I've been a psychotherapist for 30 years, and I'm always a little suspicious of products that claim to help us feel less anxious, depressed, or worried. But then I was introduced to a new kind of app called Cope Notes, and I have become a big fan. Cope Notes was developed by a guy who spent a lot of his life trying to figure out what might help support him through his own weekly psychotherapy sessions. Cope Notes is an app that gives you random texts through the day to break through some of the negative messages that might be repeating in your head. It's well researched and has been adopted by many mental health facilities. I highly recommend it. I think we can all use a little support right now. So check out copenotes.com/zestful. I will receive a small portion of those proceeds. And I'd love to hear your feedback about how it works for you. Now back to the show. Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. If you like the podcast, please share it with some of your friends. I love to hear from my listeners. Send me an email at NicoleChristina.com. It's no secret that everyone's feeling pretty restless and unsettled right now. Our lives are upside down and the future is feeling pretty uncertain. But if you're anything like me, organizing my stuff can help me feel a little calmer. It's something I can do to help me feel a little more in control and in charge of my own life. If you think decluttering could help you feel better and you could use a little assistance with that, check out the online course I've developed with professional organizer and designer Carrie Luderin. It's called Too Much Stuff. And Too Much Stuff is different from other courses or articles or guidance you may have used up. We give you clear steps to deal with the clutter and the tools to help you face the overwhelming feelings and the emotions that come up when we're going through our clutter. And a lot of those emotions are just feeling anxious or guilty or just basically flooded with a lot of different confusing feelings. The course is really practical. It's realistic. The lessons are short and punchy, and they're really manageable. We're not trying to set you up for some long exploratory, super in-depth, burdensome experience. We want something really helpful for you right now. We all need help with our anxiety. So being surrounded by more calm and less chaos can really help. So now's a good time to clear out the clutter so we can focus on what's really important in our lives. So find out more at zestfulaging.com. You'll see more about this under the web courses tab. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email at zestfulaging@gmail.com. Thanks so much. And stay tuned next week for another interview with a fascinating and inspiring guest.